Here we go. Here we go. Montgomery Deep History Project 2025, a Montgomery Deep History study, the foreword. Montgomery Deep History. Who are we? We're an organization who, through historical narratives, we help people in a way that they can better be informed about what actions should be taken in order to make a better future for our nation. I know that studies like this may be a rare find to just buckle down and dig deeper into something such as Project 2025. Of course, you know, we have presidential election that is coming up, and there are some people who have been confused as to what Project 2025 is. There are some people who think that it is directly attached to, let's say, a former president, Donald Trump, as the one who was running on the Republican ticket. And so I was like, okay, I think this is maybe something that needs to be broken down a bit. This is something that we need to really dive into. And also, I mean, it's there are some things of which, many things of which people in America need to be aware, which is one of the reasons why I decided to engage in the study. It's very important. It's basically created by or composed by a very powerful lobby group called the Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative lobby group and think tank, is what it actually says on a number of sources, that it is a think tank. But you know, when you get down to it and you look at the activity, then it is definitely a very powerful lobby group under the conservative wing. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at these social media handles. If you want to connect with Montgomery Deep History, our social media handles are right here: Facebook, IG, YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok. Okay, so make sure you connect with each of these. Like, subscribe, follow, share, the whole nine. And you see right here, Montgomery Deep History website, montgomerydeephistory.com. Okay, now just to quickly cover some preliminaries. Montgomery Deep History does not offer financial advice, neither is it a financial advisory company. It utilizes forward-looking statements. These can be terms such as may, possibly, would, should, believes, etc. These words involve risks that could produce results that are starkly different from those expected by forward-looking statements. And so we say that because some of the items that we'll be covering, it may end up be attached to various types of financial securities, stock, things of that nature. And so I don't want anyone to treat some of the things that you would see that we would bring out of Project 2025. I don't want you to see that as something that's saying, hey, go invest in this or go invest in that, put your money here, put your money there. We are not a financial advisory company, okay? This is a history tour organization, and we deal with history, okay? We are a research organization as well. Now, when we dive into the mandate for leadership, understand that we are late. Project 2025, this is part 2 to what was produced way back in 1981, okay? Mandate for leadership. That was the initial name of it. Of course, it has a mandate for leadership, the conservative promise, but that's the part 2. That's the subtitle, the conservative promise. We are late, okay? We are late. We are by no means early. This is something that has been in the making for years, and it has been published for quite some time. So it just so happened that people all of a sudden just started pointing towards Project 2025 once we began to get a little closer to the presidential election. If you want to go deeper into, as you can see, this slide right here, and then also the information, the agenda, the strategy, it approaches things in 4 pillars. I go over that in a lot more detail in the in the initial video, which is very extensive. It also has an index of words attached to it that we created here in Montgomery Deep History, so that you can know where the emphasis is placed with concepts, terms, and things of that nature. So part 1 is very extensive. It's like 2 hours, so you can take the YouTube slider and just slide all over the place, and it'll help you to gather enough information to find out what is going on with project, like its approach and then its emphasis. So if you want to go back and kind of get a deeper breakdown of these 4, the policy agenda, personnel database, training, 180-day playbook, and why that's important, then you can go back and look at part 1. Please do that so that you can really understand. And after that, like the 4 fronts that Project 2025 and this particular conservative wing that they are very, very concerned about would be family, administrative state, national sovereignty, and individual rights. Okay. And there are a lot of topics underneath each. So here we are with the foreword. Now, what we're going to do, our approach is we will be going and just pulling quotes out of each chapter, and then we'll just kind of work through those quotes as best as we can, and then we'll move on. So that's how the study is going to go. We just want to make sure that we pull out a number of the main points, and then just highlight certain things that we feel are important. The foreword is actually produced by Kevin D. Roberts, PhD. He is the president of the Heritage Foundation. You can find a number of interviews with him. He actually recently did one with, I think, the New York Times, and as in days ago from the time of this recording. So it would do you well if you want to get familiar with his approach, the way he thinks, the way he sifts through things. Then you can check out some of those interviews. All right, let's go here. Now we're starting early on. This is basically piggybacking off of the things that were laid out in part 1. And so it says here, the late 70s were by any measure a historic low point for America and the political coalition dedicated to preserving its unique legacy of human flourishing and freedom. So there were a lot of things going on. I don't want to get into that again. Okay. That it's a lot of emphasis placed on that in part 1. Please go back and check out part 1, the video that we dropped some time ago, and you will see what this means and the approach, like the perspective, a conservative perspective, looking at, especially from a moral standpoint. Okay, from a moral standpoint, then the moral influence and the political. That's this approach here. That's why I was looking at the 70s in that way. Now, the 60s and the 70s paired together, you know, there were a lot of things that were going on at that time, but that was what caused the conservatives to get together and form a strategy as to how they will influence the Oval Office, the executive branch. Okay, if you saw the previous slide, you'll see that, listen, you influence first the executive branch. If you get the ear of the executive branch, that will be directly the Oval Office. Okay, the president. then you get that component of the federal government to influence the rest, okay, to influence the executive, and the judicial and the legislative. That's the approach. So yeah, it's a lot. When you say when as they are saying it's a historic low point, you're going to be looking at a lot of the things that were going on during the 1970s. And, I think the 1970s, that's when we actually were able to get S*X education into the schools, okay? Because you had the S*X revolution. I'm saying that for purposes of not being restricted, having this video restricted, anything like that. So I know that YouTube does have its various types of parameters in place. So there are certain words that I won't say, that I'll kind of sometimes I'll allude to different things, and then there's sometimes you'll see it on the screen. So that's why I am saying that. But you'll see exactly what I'm talking about a little later if you're not getting what I'm saying with S*X. Okay. Okay. Let's see what this says. Building off of that, you see the 1970s here again. The 1970s radical chic. All right, let's dive into that real quick. So, low-income communities are drowning in addiction and government dependence. Contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of the 1970s radical chic to build the totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening. Wow. Okay. So radical chic. What is radical chic? Like what you see is talking about the 1970s, but what was going on during the 70s? All right. So radical chic. This is when you have an individual or a group of upper class people who would end up supporting some type of political ideology that will be considered radical. So this would be those who would be quite wealthy, financially well off, the upper class, and they are basically just something catches their eye with a radical political movement, and then they begin to support that. Okay, i.e., when we had Leonard Bernstein to basically support the Black Panther Party. Now, of course, if you know anything about the Black Panther Party, Black Panther having its roots right here in Lowndes County, Alabama, the county that borders us to the south. Okay, Black Panther Party, then of course, its association with Oakland or whatnot. If you know anything about the Black Panther Party, you should know that it was basically accused of having direct ties to the CCP, which is a Chinese Communist Party. And, there were a lot of surveillance that was going on during that time because it was suspected that was what was happening. And now there were individuals during the time of the Black Panthers when they were very, very active in the United States. There are still some active subgroups that are going on from the BPP, but at that time when they first formed, there were some individuals who did support directly the Black Panther. The communism, let's say, outright communism. And that was during the time of Vietnam. You got Vietnam vets who are just to and fro, going from Vietnam to this particular country, that country. There was just a lot it was a lot that was happening during that time. So this is basically what it is talking about here when it is referring to radical chic with someone from the upper class supporting something of the type of, I guess, quote unquote, radical political ideology, or a radically political group, a politically radical group like the Black Panthers. And so they're saying that they're using that to build a totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening. And so Leonard Bernstein, also, he was a conductor and a composer, okay? And he was very well known during that time. The Great Awakening, that's like that's basically the way that Project 2025 is treating this whole thing that's going on nowadays with being woke. And go back to part one now. Part one is going to be talking about the where woke came from, or wokeness, how it started, but then how it was basically purloined from the Black community. You know, go back to that, and I would like to hear some thoughts on that as well, if you would hit up the comments. But just like you had the Great Awakening, okay, this harkens back to the Great Awakening, the Christian religious movement at the beginning, at the inception of the United States, when you have like individuals like George Whitefield and also Jonathan Edwards, those Great Awakening pastors, preachers, evangelists, and how they influenced America. And there were some other things that they were involved in as well with slavery. There are some of their ties with slavery. But you take that concept and then you apply it to this phrase here. Now it's not the Great Awakening, it's the Great Awakening, to where people are going through this revival of the 1970s. You see how that works? That's kind of how it is. You're coming back to what Project 2025 is referring to, a quote-unquote totalitarian cult. Okay. Now I remember this quote as being very interesting when I first read it, and this is the only time where you will find Black children being mentioned, okay? This right here, this one occurrence. And so it says 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers. Now, this is building off of the previous quote, including more than 70% of Black children. 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of Black children. There is no government program that can replace the hole in a child's soul cut out by the absence of a father. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts. So many of the problems government programs are designed to solve, but can't, are ultimately problems created by the crisis of marriage and the family. The world has never seen a thriving, healthy, free, and prosperous society where most children grow up without their married parents. If current trends continue, we're heading toward social implosion. End quote. Now that's loaded. That's loaded. There's a lot said there. So if we're dealing with 40% of all children being born to unmarried mothers, look at that next one, that next clause. It's saying 70% of black children, 70% of black children are born to unmarried mothers. Now, is that a point of concern, I guess, is the question, because that's a statistic that Mr. Roberts is, Dr. Roberts is feeling that it is something of which emphasis needs to be placed. Now, that is concerning. I will say that is concerning. That is a point of concern, because the question is, what's going on? Like, why that? Because you have black Americans in our nation, and it's, there's like the percent, we're 12 to 13, somewhere it's kind of fluctuating. It's been fluctuating there for a number of decades, 12, 13% of the entire nation. But then you have 70% of the children who grow up in black homes being without a father present, or being without a father. And so he's saying that stuff is tied, like it's tied to teen. I'm sorry if I need to, let's say this. Teen, this element of the teenagers right here, substance, or we can say that is a form of SA, okay? Rejection of the church and high school dropouts. It's saying that it is contributed, or that it contributes to poverty. It contributes to crime, and it contributes to mental illness. Now, is that far-fetched? Is he going too far? Are we, like, can we do without fathers in the home? So if this is not a problem, are we able to do without fathers in the home? Are we doing okay? Like, specifically, if he's pointing out the black community, do we see some of these things in the black community? Are there points in the social makeup of a people? Are there points to where there are concerns in the black community? Points of concern. Like, is there crime that makes the headlines in cities across America? Is there poverty? Do we make headlines for this kind of stuff? I guess maybe that's something that we can look into. But when this was pulled out, I was like, you know what? Let me kind of go aside and see what this is about. Because when you're dealing with 70%, I'm like, okay, that's a high percentage. So let's see if we can look a little further into that, because that's high. That's why it sparked the type of curiosity when I first read it. And so I looked around. University here, who engaged in a study on women and marriage. This is Bowling Green State University. That smaller chart right there, we're gonna expand that in the next slide. But women in marriage over a century, and you have right here from the 1900s all the way to 2020, or as close to our time as possible. So this is it, looking at it up to a century plus. So as you can see, some of the information down at the bottom, a significant drop after women's suffrage in 1920. Okay, that's when women began to vote. I don't know why exactly why we had that. Now there is some literature that is out there that talks about women's suffrage, and then also some of the things that began to happen with women being involved in factories, because you got to think, we're dealing with a major world war, the first one that we would come to know at that point, World War One. And so it's placing various types of demands on American families. So when we're talking about rations, food rations, rations on fuel, and then automobile, the mobility has increased. So you're getting automobiles that are being pushed out. And, this is a point right here, the 1920. There's something new that is being introduced to the American family. And moms are being asked to get out of the, to be out of the home a little more. So you end up seeing a decline right there. But then it says the part of the traditionalists and the baby boomer generation witnessed an incline in marriage between adults. So what happens here? Because from 1930 up to the 50, you're going to be dealing with it. It's going to be leading up to the Korean War, and then also to Vietnam with some of those some of the Chinese wars that would end up happening. Okay, or various the Asian wars, of which America got involved. But you also have right here the 1930s. You see how it inclines? That's World War II. But with World War II, you're going to end up also having the what we would call the period of the fundamentalists. Okay, fundamental evangelicals who are going to be going out evangelizing. You probably recall Billy Graham and a number of others, and they would basically be traveling they would kind of catch on and be traveling all over the world. Mobility is increasing. You're having various types of preaching conferences being held. And so that period right there is called the traditionalist. And then it leads up to the baby boomers. That will be from the soldiers who are leaving World War II and coming back home, and they spark a baby boom. That's what's being captured there. So that kind of helps us to better understand how it looked like it was about to be a sharp decline, and then it spiked, and the next thing you know, we end up getting a major decline. So it looks like after the Korean War and after Vietnam, what happens here? What happens with marriage? Vietnam, the Korean War, the S*X revolution, and on it goes. You get just a gradual decline. A gradual decline. So that caused me to look at the demographics. You get white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, and then other. Now, the 58%, it is a little tough to read that legend. Hopefully the colors are okay from the side of the video as far as the output is concerned. But you're going to end up getting, it looks like the Asians being at 50%, the 50 percentile, and then you have Caucasian, white, 51%, Hispanic Latino falling right after that, and 43%, and then you have 38% with other. That would be anyone who would fall in the category of probably Pacific Islander, so on and so forth. But look at this one. This is the one that is very interesting because you have black American women, 26%. 26%. And this is from 1940. And if you can see it, it's going by the decade, 1940 all the way up until 2020 and beyond. And this is what's going on here. 26% of black women. The question is why? So when we look here, now this part is very interesting because you have those who are educated, and look at them, they are at 59%. So that will be a bachelor's plus, okay? Bachelor's, you have undergrad and possibly postgraduate who are captured in that 59%. So they have been quite constant. You see that? From the 40s all the way to 2018 and beyond. 59 right to 60%. Being quite stable. And so then you have, now I know that there are a number of educated black American women. There are a lot of educated black American women. And so my thing is that where is that? I don't understand how it's the 26th percentile when we would have 59% captured in those who are who have either undergrad or postgrad education. High school, look at how high school, you notice that during the wars, a number of women were, the dynamics were different. So you had those who have high school GED, they would end up being married. A number of them. So you see how that even went up during the 60s. That's because the dynamic was a little different during that time. It was definitely different. But I just think those things are quite interesting. And those who have less than a high school degree, there's no telling what type of issues. Of course, it causes many issues today. And it could be various things, mental illness being at play. They are in the 27th percentile there. Okay, so Schweitzer, she actually did the work on this particular, these charts here. Interesting, very interesting stuff. So that's something we might end up coming back to. I would love to do a discussion on that as well, because I think that's very interesting information. Like, these are interesting dynamics here. And I'm sure there are some things that I'm not considering as I'm looking at this. Okay. Now let's go back to Dr. Roberts. Let's see what Dr. Roberts said. There is a need to eliminate marriage penalties in federal welfare programs and the tax code, and installing work requirements for food stamps. Okay. Now this, when I first read this, I don't think Dr. Roberts understands where it is now as far as like food assistance, the food program, SNAP, EBT, and all that. As far as marriage penalties, now I know that when in Alabama specifically, there were rules in place to where if you had a man in the home. Now this affected a number of black households, especially those who are still involved in sharecropping or coming out of sharecropping. Like, there were a number of black households who were in need of food assistance, and they just couldn't do it. When the women would go and apply, they would ask if there was a living husband in the home, and if that was the case, then of course, if you have a husband gonna be alive, if you can call a husband. But if that was the case, you have a viable man in the house, no, you cannot get food stamps. What you would do with food stamps back in those days, you would end up paying a ticket for something that would yield a lot more than what you paid for. So if you took $25, if they said, like down at here in Montgomery County, if they said, hey, food stamps cost $25, you end up getting $70 plus for that ticket. So you have to kind of purchase that ticket. But there were marriage penalties in place during that time, which ended up working kind of against the black family especially, and probably a number of other demographics, low-income families, to encourage them to be apart. Now, you go back to part one, and we'll talk about some of the procedures culturally that black families had in place when a social worker would come around to do checks on whether or not family would need to keep their, would be able or eligible to keep their food stamps. So, I mean, I don't think that applies today. If you are single, there may be the case of getting more if you're a single mother or if you're single. But as far as the marriage penalties, I would need to know what Dr. Roberts is talking about, because as far as I know, we don't, I think a lot of those things are dated as far as it being like it was in the 1960s. Okay. So I need more on that. I don't think that's credible. Marriage penalties, if there are marriage penalties, like, where are they? Are they hidden? Are they implied? Where are they? I need help on that. But I can't really see that. The next conservative president must make, so this is a turn directly towards the president. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for the woke culture warriors. Once again, go back to the index and you'll see how important Project 2025 treats the term woke. Woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms S*X orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Okay. Read up on Alabama DEI universities. Read up on that. Do some research on that, please, with how the programs are being handled. Okay. Gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. It is saying that the next conservative president must put things in place for that to happen. And then deleting those terms, all the terms that I just mentioned, delete them. Get them out. That's what this is saying. Gender equity, gender awareness, gender, anything dealing with gender or any type of gender situation as far as we're dealing with it now in today's time. And it's saying also delete abortion, reproductive rights, and things of that nature from regulation, contracts, grants, or or even just plain regulation. And then it says, and pretty much any piece of legislation that exists. To take it a step further, this word, I don't even know how to say that without getting, but you see it there. That word should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered S*X offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. I can't even add anything to that. It's just because I don't need to explain that one. So I'll just allow his words to be. Quote from Dr. Roberts' section forward. Now, going further, allowing parents or physicians to reassign the S*X of a minor is child and must end. So it's saying the reassigning of the S*X of a minor is child. The surest way to put the federal government back to work for the American people is to reduce its size and scope back to something resembling the original constitutional intent. So what this is saying, it is that now, of course, this is advocating, you can tell by the way this quote is working. This is advocating for small government, and then more so an expansion of the power of states' rights. Let all the states be their own little things again, to where they are in control and they are able to govern themselves more fully, okay? Because states' rights still exist, always will exist in America. As far as we're able to continue with the Constitution and submit to the Constitution, there will always be their little governing entities. But what this is saying is that the pendulum needs to swing more so on the side of the states, and the federal government, they just need to get their hands out of the states and let them do what they need to do. So, for example, Florida's situation would be different from like something dealing with Montana. You can even think about the geography. You can think about even from the geography to the resources to just a number of other things. So the needs are different. You have different, even the culture is different. So you're going to have a number of different elements that will cause many points of contrast in between states of those two different parts of the United States. So it's wanting to allow those little tiny governments, these micro governments that exist under the federal government, to receive more of their power. And so it wouldn't be far-fetched to say back, to receive it back. So what this is saying is that it's always been that way. Okay? It's saying that the Constitution actually supports that. The founding fathers built the nation to basically allow it to be that way. Shrink federal government, enlarge states' rights for the states to govern themselves. The federal government is growing larger and less constitutionally accountable, even to the president, every year. Okay, that was basically building off the previous one. These are some points here of concern that Dr. Roberts decided to note in the foreword. So when it's dealing with the bureaucrats, those who are in those who are the government agencies and officials who serve in governing agencies, and those who would be the actual officials. They're saying the bureaucrats at the Department of Homeland Security, following the lead of a feckless administration, order border and immigration enforcement agencies to help migrants criminally enter our country with impunity. Okay, so it's dealing with the whole border situation. Bureaucrats at the Department of Education inject racist, anti-American, ahistorical propaganda into America's classrooms. So this is basically going back to the woke, the usage of the word woke. So these things right here would fall in the category. As far as the conservative wing is concerned, these things advocate what would be called wokeness. Okay. Woke bureaucrats at the Pentagon. Just read that other point again. They're saying that bureaucrats are injecting racist, anti-American, and then historical. So that means that stuff that is not even true history. I would like to know what that is, because I know that once we get into the chapters, it's really going to get into that. Woke bureaucrats at the Pentagon force troops to attend training seminars about quote unquote white privilege. You notice how it's saying training about white privilege. So there have been, I have heard about various types of, it's more so, it's like a DEI program inside of the military. So you have high-ranking officials in the military who they're required to have so many hours of this particular training. And so that's what he's talking about there. Bureaucrats at the State Department infuse U.S. foreign aid programs with woke extremism about intersectionality and abortion. And so just to help us to better understand intersectionality. Intersectionality is I'll give you a working term for it, but it's how systems, things like racism, gender, and all this other stuff, how those individuals who are a part of that experience oppression. And so all of these things are basically intersecting. The working definition is a framework understanding how multiple systems of oppression and privilege interact to create unique experiences and outcomes for different types of people. So that's what intersectionality is. And there's a lot more that can be said about intersectionality and what it is. But there you have that. And it says to what must happen, Dr. Roberts is saying that America must, or let's say the president. The president must defang and defund the woke culture warriors who have infiltrated every last institution in America. Defang and defund. So withdraw funds from any type of program that would support anything considered woke. Now, that may not have any limits. That may not have any limits. It's what those who would have the ear of the president, is what they define as that. Okay? And what if the president say, hey, I'm going to put you over this program here so that you can make sure you scope out anything that smacks of wokeism and do this, like defund it. And so you can also see it as alluding to kind of the snake analogy when it's saying defund. I mean, to defang, remove the fangs from. So it's using that kind of language. Okay. And so we're getting to our conclusion here. This is just so you can get a taste or get a feel of what's in just the foreword of Project 2025. It says the next conservative president must end the left's social experimentation with the military, restore warfighting as its sole mission, and set defeating the threat of the Chinese Communist Party as its highest priority. We just talked about a number of these already. Get back to war fighting, and then defeat the CCP. Defeat the threat of the CCP. Need to put that, make that its highest priority. Building off of that, I know none of us are prepared for this. Let's look at this. If you want to understand the danger posed by the collaboration between big tech and the CCP, remember that's the Chinese Communist Party, look no further than TikTok. Uh-oh. Now understand that this was more than likely composed in 2021 or somewhere around there, right when TikTok had just became very popular. All right. So this was before the president, CEO, founder of TikTok was able to express, through to the media, was able to express what TikTok is, where it comes from, and all these other different things, and whether or not it has ties to the CCP. So it says the highly addictive video app used by 80 million Americans every month and overwhelmingly popular among teenage girls is in effect a tool of Chinese espionage. So in other words, espionage is a spying, right? The ties between TikTok and the Chinese government are not loose, and they are not coincidental. Confucius Institutes, TikTok and any other arm of of Chinese propaganda and espionage should be outlawed, not merely monitored. Universities taking money from the CCP should lose their accreditation charters and eligibility for federal funds. Now, the Confucius Institutes, that would be the educational program of the Chinese Communist Party. It exists, for example, it exists in France. They have a program. There are different places around the globe that actually being the education. So it's not like we are going to proselytize you or bring you into it. No, it's an educational program to learn about Chinese culture, and also the larger Chinese Communist Party. And so it's saying that type of education needs to be removed. Confucius Institutes, that's that particular educational wing. And we do have some of those programs in some of our universities throughout America. Perhaps even especially some of our Ivy Leagues. So that TikTok one kind of surprised us, right? Because I know a lot of us are on TikTok, and we see a lot. We use it in a lot of different ways. May find it very beneficial, but you have this here. Now to add more, It says this. This is our final slide. This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors. Conservatives have just 2 years and one shot to get this right. With enemies at home and abroad, there is no margin for error. Time is running short. If we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. Now let that sit and simmer. I think that this right here, these words, the very existence of these words coming from a very powerful institution like the Heritage Foundation. I think this is these words right here will make this upcoming election and the period thereafter leading up to January. I think it's going to make this period possibly, since emancipation, one of the most important and interesting periods in the history of our nation because of everything that is going on. And I would say that care needs to be taken in words, especially when, dealing with being an organization with such scope of influence and power. To tell people, you got to be careful when you're gonna tell people via literature, time is running short. Time is running short. You only have one shot. As a matter of fact, time is not just running short. You got one shot. One shot to get this right. And then if you don't get this right, the very idea of America may be gone, may have flown out the window. What do you think that generates from people? Now, if the wrong person hears that, reads that, and allows that to saturate their minds, what do you think the wrong person or the wrong group of people, what do you think they're going to do? And this is one of the reasons why I'm saying that, okay, since this is put out here like that, let's say, for example, if the election swings blue. Then that means that there are going to be a number of folks who will be walking around with this in their minds. And they will be thinking that, hey, we no longer live in a democratic republic. So if you no longer think that you live in a democratic republic, then what does the Constitution ask for? Let me just get to that. What does the Constitution ask for? If it gets to the point to where, hey, it's no longer a democratic republic. This is no longer a democracy. What does it ask for? America, that's probably what we might find ourselves dealing with. So we need to be careful. We need to be very careful. As an American people, that's why I'm saying we need to, that's why our TikToks are arranged the way they're arranged. Care must be taken. We need to come together with our ideas, and we need to make sure that, I honor what you're saying, even though I may differ. that we need to be able to acknowledge the differences. That's what makes this place the type of place that it is, the type of government that it is. We don't want to go back to the structure of what was going on back in the time of Europe, the British structure. We don't want to go back to the monarchy that many of these guys ran from to come over here and try to start something. We don't want to go back to taxation, being taxed without being represented. We don't want to go back to that. We had a compilation of various failures and all this other stuff that happened in the past. And so that's how America was built. It was built by a number of smart individuals, very well informed, quite wise. That was the founding fathers. And these guys put together this place, this structure of government that we have. Of course, they were borrowed from a lot of different things. They were borrowed from Native Americans who are already here, borrowed from African perspectives and ideologies, and also Persia. You remember with the democratic perspective that was revealed in the Greek historian Herodotus in his book, showing that Persia was what I think it was hold on, I'm not even going to name that individual. I don't want to get his name incorrect, but they someone who was a contemporary of Astyages, I think, and he brought up the idea of being able to run a government like this, like from many different places and many different types of perspectives and ideologies coming together to form this thing here, the American government. That's what makes us what we are. And so let's try to deal with each other and be cordial. Let's try to remain. We don't want the 1860s to be brought again. Okay. I mean, people are looking at us and they're waiting for us to melt internally. That's been going on for a number of decades. They're waiting for us to implode. Okay. So let's have high thoughts about ourselves. Let's try to come to the table and let's deal with home. We're here in America. Let's deal with home. Let's deal with ourselves. Let's be able to form some good, healthy conversation. And there are some things that we do need to put aside. Let's engage in debate. Let's engage in good debate with good, solid decorum. And not having to, do all these ad hominem attacks and getting people eliminated for various reasons. Let's come together and let's know how to move forward with things. Okay. So here are some of our references. I'll just have that there. You can come back to that. But that is the conclusion of Project 2025, the foreword, a Montgomery Deep History Study. Okay, let me go back to our social media handles and just have that up for those of you who want to interact with some of our content. If you want to be up on some of the upcoming lives that's on TikTok, make sure you go and check us out, share, and subscribe to YouTube, and like and follow our pages, especially on TikTok, because that's where a number of our lives will be produced. Join in on the conversation, because guys, we got some things to talk about. Okay. All right. Well, until next time, this is Montgomery Deep History, where we tell a deeper story.